Okay, so today we are going to be talking about the production possibilities frontier, and we're going to start out with two products, necklaces and bracelets, and with my mom and me. So basically in 1 hour, if I devoted all my time and resources to making necklaces, I could make 2 necklaces, right? But then, if my mother devoted all of her time to making necklaces, in 1 hour she could make 2.5 necklaces. Now looking down here, if I devoted all my time to making bracelets in 1 hour, I could again make only 2 bracelets. Yet if my mom devoted all of her time to making bracelets in 1 hour, she could make 5 bracelets. So as we can see down here, I have all of the goods I can produce in 1 hour and all of the goods my mom can produce in 1 hour. Alright, now the skills and equipment that we would need for producing bracelets and necklaces would essentially just be labor and technology, the labor coming from my mom and myself. And this labor is actually specialized, right? Specialized jewelry making skills. And then the materials would be the beads, strings, clasps, and the equipment, aka the technology in this instance, would be a bead drill in order to make holes inside the beads so we could string the beads together. Now, moving over here, so my mother and I, we make these beads and necklaces in a 10-hour workday. So using the data from this slide and projecting it onto a 10-hour workday, we have this table made. So if I devoted all my time to making necklaces, we could see that it would result in 20 necklaces being made. Now if I devoted all my time to making bracelets and none of the time to making necklaces, as you can see 0 right here, then in that case I would be able to make 20 bracelets. So using this data, we're going to go ahead and make a projection possibilities frontier. Sorry about that, actually production possibilities frontier. And so how this graph is made, so if we look over here on the left hand side, right here, so it's necklaces, and here's the value in quantity. And here it says that if I spend all of my time making necklaces and none of my time making bracelets, in this instance, I'm only going to be able to make 20 necklaces. And over here says if I dedicate all my time to making bracelets and none of my time to make necklaces, then I'll be able to make 20 bracelets. So then if we go over here to the right hand side, basically we do the same thing again for my mother. So if my mother dedicates all of her time to making necklaces and none of her time to making bracelets, it's going to be 25. And if she dedicates all of her time to making bracelets and none of her time to making necklaces, she's going to make 50 bracelets. And this right here are the production possibilities frontier for both myself and my mother. So just by looking at these two graphs, we can see here, we can actually make a very important observation. Here, my mother, in the same amount of time, a 10-hour workday, she can make 25 necklaces and 50 bracelets, right? Dedicated, in the instance that she dedicated all 10 hours to one making necklaces and all 10 hours again to making all 10 hours to making bracelets. We can see here 25 and 50. Yet, if I dedicated these same 10 hours again, right, so all 10 maybe to necklaces and all 10 maybe to bracelets, but if we look here, my mother beats me out every single time. Right here with the 25, and I only have 20, and here she beats me again in bracelets. She can make 50 bracelets in 10 hours, whereas I can only make 20. This right here brings about a very important concept. This concept is the concept of absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is the ability of an individual, a firm, or a country to produce more of a good or service than competitors using the same amount of resources. So going back to this slide, we can see that my mother has an absolute advantage over me in making both necklaces and bracelets because she can make both of them in the same amount of time, that being the 10 hours. So essentially, because my mother is better at producing necklaces and bracelets, she has an absolute advantage in producing necklaces, and again, an absolute advantage in producing bracelets. Now, even though my mother has an absolute advantage over me in producing necklaces and bracelets, we can ask the question, would it be worth our while for myself and my mother in order for us to trade with each other? Well, in order to do this, first of all, we need to calculate the opportunity cost. calculate the opportunity cost, we need to calculate the slope for both my production possibility frontier and also the slope for my mother's production possibility frontier. So going back here, if we take the rise over the run for myself and the rise over the run for my mother, we can go over here and calculate the slope for both of our production possibility frontiers. After doing the calculations, we can see that the slope of my production possibility frontier is -1. What this means is that the opportunity cost of making one bracelet is one necklace for me, and the opportunity cost of making one necklace is one bracelet for me. And for my mother, on the other hand, her slope came out to be -0.5. So opportunity cost for making one bracelet for my mother is 0.5 necklaces. And the opportunity cost for making one necklace for my mother is 2 bracelets. Now that we have both of the opportunity costs, we can go over here and make a table. In this table that I've made, we can see that the opportunity cost of making one necklace for myself is 1 bracelet, and the opportunity cost again of my mother for making one necklace is 2 bracelets, right? Now the opportunity cost for me for making one bracelet is 1 necklace, and for my mother for making one bracelet is 0.5 necklaces. Now if we look at the data in this table, we can see here that I have a much lower opportunity cost for making one necklace as compared to my mother. Now, on this side, for bracelets, my mother has a much lower opportunity cost for making bracelets than I do. From this data, we can see because I have a lower opportunity cost here, is that it would be more beneficial for me to dedicate my time to making necklaces, and it would be more beneficial for my mother to dedicate her time to making bracelets. In both of these instances, I have a competitive advantage in making necklaces because I have a lower opportunity cost, and my mother has a competitive advantage in making bracelets because she has a lower opportunity cost. What competitive advantage means is that it's the ability of an individual, a firm, or a country to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than competitors. So going back to this example, over here, it makes much more sense for me to make necklaces because I have a lower opportunity cost. It makes much sense for my mother to make bracelets because she has a lower opportunity cost. Now what's interesting to note here is that even though my mother had an absolute advantage in making both necklaces and bracelets, look right here, she has absolute advantage in necklaces and bracelets, she did not have a competitive advantage in both necklaces and bracelets. This is because even though my mother can make more necklaces in 10 hours than I can, the opportunity cost for making necklaces is higher than for me, because when she makes necklaces, she gives up more necklaces than I do. So even though she has an absolute advantage over me in making necklaces, it is more costly for her to make necklaces than it is for me. But then again, her opportunity cost for making bracelets is lower than mine. So for bracelets, she has an absolute advantage and also a competitive advantage. Sorry about that, I made a mistake earlier. It's not a competitive advantage, I meant to say comparative advantage. So my mother has absolute advantage in necklaces and bracelets, but she does not have a comparative advantage. Comparative. So finally, looking at this table, we can see what would happen if I specialized in the good in which I had the lower opportunity cost, and if my mother specialized in the good in which she had the lower opportunity cost. So if we go back to this table, first of all, actually looking at this table, we can see the production and consumption without trade for myself in necklaces and bracelets, and for my mother in necklaces and bracelets. So if we go back here to the first slide, so looking at this side, point A corresponds to 7 necklaces and 13 bracelets made in a 10-hour workday, and point C corresponds to 10 necklaces and 30 bracelets made in a 10-hour workday. Now if we look here, if I specialized only in the production of necklaces, because I had a lower opportunity cost, my mother specialized only in the production of bracelets, I would make 20 necklaces in one day and 0 bracelets in one day. My mother would make 0 necklaces in one day and 50 bracelets in one day. Now, if we were to trade with each other, and we would trade, my mother would give me 15 bracelets in exchange for So she would give me 15 bracelets in exchange for 12 necklaces. We would have this right here. So 15 bracelets in exchange for 12 necklaces. This would result in a gain of 1 necklace for me, 2 bracelets for me, 2 necklaces for my mom, and 5 bracelets for my mom. As you can see here, my consumption with trade: 8 as compared to the initial 7, 15 as compared to the initial 13, 12 as compared to the initial 10, and 35 as compared to the initial 30. So, using this data, we can go back to the original graph and see how trade actually was beneficial to both me and my mother. And that data is represented right here. Point B, right, and also point D. Both of these points on the graphs are not on the production possibilities frontier. And so looking at this graph, we can see how trade helped both my mother and myself.